Would you believe me if I were to tell you that Speak No Evil is one of the best horror movies of the year? Because it's true. I absolutely adored this movie. It was such a fun roller coaster of a movie. Now, I think we all kind of know what it's about, given the fact we've seen the trailer about a gajillion times. Um, but even so, I don't think you're prepared for how funny this movie is, how wacky it is, but also how truly scary and unsettling and just how much more of a conversation than just your typical horror movie would be. And that's what I really want to get into. So now what I really liked about this movie was the fact that it doesn't turn into your typical horror movie. It doesn't really apply by a lot of those rules until about the last 30 minutes. And that's where a lot of the beauty for this movie lies. The true horror in this movie comes from spending most of it trapped with people that you're uncomfortable with, that you don't agree with, parenting styles wise, politically wise, just that you don't have much in common with, like that awkwardness and that discomfort. That's really the big horror of this movie. And it's something I think a lot of us can relate to. It's also very much a slow buildup of a movie. It builds up to a big climactic third act. And while most of the times with that kind of movie, you remember the third act most, I think in this case is one of the rare instances where you really remember the buildup because there's so much being said throughout that time, and they have so much fun with it as well. The comedy in this movie, it's not one where you're laughing at the movie, you're really much laughing with the movie, and I really appreciate that. There's so much of that. The comedy is how the characters in the film get to know each other, and it's how you get to know them. It's how you become a little bit more invested. You might not love all of the characters, but you see them as real people, and I think that's very important in setting up where this film ends up ultimately going. So, at its core, Speak No Evil is really a story about different perspectives, different parenting styles, and at the end of the day, the ultimate truth that no matter how hard you try, your kids are still going to be really effed up. And I like that this movie kind of plays with the ideas that all parenting styles have their pitfalls, and how we're all kind of secretly judging each other for the choices that we make in our lives, as parents, as people in general. And I think that all of this is, like I mentioned earlier, really well realized with that humor. It's just such an interesting journey to see the characters go on. Now, while we're on the topic of the characters, James McAvoy, by far and away, is the reason, one of the main reasons to go see this movie. He is both hot and evil in this movie. He really elevates the material, and chews up the scenery in a way that is just so good and it's so intoxicating to watch. His wife, played by Aisling Franciosi, I want to say that's how you pronounce her name. I had never seen her before, but she has a really strong screen presence, and I just, for some reason, she really stood out to me, even though her role is significantly smaller than the other roles in the script. But I think she does a really good job. And on the flip side, we have the other parents, the other couple played by Mackenzie Davis and Scoot McNairy. Now, Mackenzie, I think she does a really good job of playing this really overprotective helicopter mom, if you will, who is also very much miserable in her marriage but won't really say anything. And her character acts as a really good foil to James McAvoy's character. There is so much tension between them, and not like sexual tension or anything of that. It's like tension of these people do not like each other. And James McAvoy was kind of playing with her, wanting her to own up to the fact that she doesn't really like them, but she doesn't. She kind of gets her a little bit towards the end because she kind of has to. But there's so much of just like how you deal with people that you don't really like, and how when is it time to stand up for yourself, stand up for your family. I think that that's makes her character a lot more three-dimensional than just being really annoying kind of mom who's just kind of circling her kid, and ultimately ends up feeding into her kids anxiety, by being so overindulgent in that. So I think that was also an interesting thing to take, and that kind of leads to one of the plot points in this film that kind of brings them back to a dangerous situation, with her being unwilling to remove a crutch from her child because it's what makes her feel more comfortable, even though it ultimately ends up not working out for them. And I'm talking about that stupid bunny. I'm not going to get too into it, but if you see the movie, if you see a bunny, screw that bunny. Now, her partner is played by Scooter McNairy, whose character is completely useless. And I don't mean useless as like not contributing to the plot. He really does. But his character contributes to his family's danger. He has such a need for masculine validation because he had been so emasculated by losing his job. His wife, you know, doesn't is kind of miserable in their marriage, and so he really needs this validation from James McAvoy's character, who's this big, tough alpha guy. And I think that that is what inevitably ends up putting him in a place where they're going to this other couple's house that they barely know, putting their family in danger just to fulfill that validation, which is really interesting. Also, the tension between him and James McAvoy's character is palpable. They go off together in several scenes, and I was fully expecting for them to just like consummate their feelings for each other, because it is at one point James McAvoy's character plays him Eternal Flame, and that kind of becomes their song. It's played a couple of times throughout the rest of the film and in the end credits, and it's hard to be like, you guys want to kiss so bad. And it's just so funny. It really added a lot to the humor that I mentioned earlier, and I just think that really worked for this film, because oftentimes people, men especially, they'll do things, they'll be kind of jerks in order to validate this other alpha male type that you really want to fit in with. And I think that's a problem that we see a lot. It's like more common than it should be, and I'm glad that it was kind of presented in this horror film, which out of all the places it would be, but I think it really worked here. Going back a little bit to the overall film, the film's pacing does shift in the third act, and it becomes really more of a battle for survival. And I think Mackenzie Davis really is one of the standouts in that third act, because she goes full mama bear. She may not have a whole lot of skills, but she is going to protect her kids at any cost. And I think that that's something that's so empowering and like a touch emotional for some reason. And I think that that's really redeems her and her husband's character a lot, is their love for their daughter, and now how that translates to their love to just protecting these children who are put into such a difficult situation. Especially that little boy who plays James McAvoy's son. You can see throughout the film, it's been deeply seated, the kind of abuse and not great stuff that has happened to him in this family. But he really comes into his own in the third act, and he has this like one final scene that I think we can all agree, those who saw the movie, I personally thought I was very proud of him. I was felt like a proud dad, just being like, yeah, you know what, you stood up for yourself, and we love to see that. So yes, in Speak No Evil, it's not about the gore or the jump scares, but it is about the slow creeping realization of just how far being polite can let a situation go. I think one of the lines that kind of really cements this is when Scoot McNairy's character asks James McAvoy, why us? Why my family? And James goes, because you let us. I really appreciate that this film went to lengths to show you the dangers of being polite instead of being honest. And it's something that I will remember this film for. So yes, I think you should definitely see Speak No Evil as soon as you can. It is a great time. It is a great movie. And I am kind of sad now that I won't ever see that trailer again.